There's a particular kind of grief that only a parent can experience. It's looking at your kid, someone you raised, and just yesterday they were following you everywhere, and realizing you don't recognize them anymore. The way they talk, the things they care about, not wanting to spend time with you anymore. And you sit there asking yourself, where did my kid go? This is one of the most disorienting experiences a parent can have, one that not many talk about. If you've had a moment of looking at your teenager and genuinely not knowing who you're talking to, I want you to hear this first. You didn't miss something obvious. You didn't fail to see it coming. And this isn't necessarily a sign that something has gone terribly wrong. What you're watching is one of the most psychologically complex processes a human being goes through, and understanding what's actually driving it changes everything about how you respond to it. Here's the thing nobody explains to parents. We talk about teenagers changing. It's practically a cliche. They go through phases. It's just adolescence. But what gets glossed over is how sudden and how complete these shifts can feel, and why they happen. We treat teenage identity change as background noise, when it's actually one of the most significant psychological events of a person's life. And for parents watching it happen in real time, it's just a phase doesn't answer the question that actually matters. Why did it happen so fast? And what was I supposed to see? Let's start with the developmental psychology. Erik Erikson identified adolescence as the stage of identity versus role confusion, a period when a young person's central psychological task is answering the question, who am I? Separate from my family, my childhood, and the person everyone expected me to be. This process doesn't look like a quiet, gradual evolution. For many teenagers, it looks like a series of dramatic experiments, new friend groups, new aesthetics, new values that seem to contradict everything you thought you knew about them. A 2018 study in developmental psychology found that adolescents who showed the most abrupt identity shifts were not less psychologically stable than their peers. In many cases, they were doing the work of identity formation more actively, not less. The shift isn't evidence of instability, it's evidence of process. Think about that. What looks like your kid becoming someone else may actually be your kid doing something profoundly necessary, trying on versions of themselves to find the one that actually fits. But here's where it gets more complicated. Not every overnight change is purely developmental. Sometimes what looks like a sudden personality shift is the visible aftermath of something that happened, something your teenager may not have told you about. A friendship that ended badly, a public humiliation, a social betrayal, a first relationship that broke something open. Dr. Dan Siegel, clinical professor of psychiatry at UCLA, describes how adolescent identity is deeply socially embedded, meaning your teen's sense of self isn't just internal, it's built and maintained through their relationships. When a core relationship collapses, a best friend, a peer group, a romantic relationship, the psychological impact isn't just grief, it's disorientation. The version of themselves they'd built around that relationship stops being available to them, and they have to start over. The overnight change, in many cases, wasn't overnight at all. It was a slow internal unraveling that finally became visible the moment the old scaffolding came down and you could see what was being rebuilt underneath. But here's where it gets interesting, and where most parents make a move that backfires almost every time. The instinct when you see this change is to name it. You're not acting like yourself. I don't know who you are right now. What happened to you? And every one of those statements, however genuinely felt, lands to your teen as a single request. Go back. Be the version of yourself I recognized, the one that was easier for this relationship. To a teenager who is in the middle of building something new, that request doesn't feel like love, it feels like pressure to abandon the work. And so they build the new version of themselves further from you, not out of cruelty, but out of self-preservation. Because the one thing a teenager in identity formation cannot afford is to rebuild themselves in a direction someone else approves of. That's not identity, that's performance. And here's the paradox at the center of it. Your teen needs you most during this disorienting period of self-reconstruction, but the more they sense that you need them to stay who they were, to remain recognizable, to be the kid you're comfortable with, the less safe it feels to let you into who they're becoming. They are simultaneously the most uncertain they have ever been, and the most defended. They want to be seen, and they're terrified of being seen by someone who might prefer an earlier draft of them. The distance isn't rejection, it's protection of something fragile and unfinished that they can't afford to have dismantled before it's ready.
I want to be direct here because this matters. There is a real difference between the rapid identity shifts that are part of healthy adolescent development and changes that signal something more serious. If what you're watching came alongside withdrawal from all relationships, not just you, but friends, activities, life, or if it came with behaviors that concern you, changes in basic functioning, or anything your gut reads as more than identity exploration, please don't wait on it. An adolescent therapist can see things in one conversation that take a parent months to identify. And if something feels wrong, your instinct is worth listening to. Not catastrophizing, but listening. Picture what it's like to be inside this. You're 15. Everything you believed about yourself, who your people are, what kind of person you are, where you belong, has suddenly become unreliable. Maybe something happened, or maybe you're simply in a developmental moment that feels like standing on ground that won't stop moving. And you're doing the only thing available to you, building something new, trying things on, looking for the version of yourself that can get through what's coming. You don't have a name for what you're doing. You just know that the old version stopped working. And you're doing it largely alone, because the people closest to you keep asking you to go back to being someone you've already outgrown. Here's what I want to offer you instead of that. The question isn't, where did my kid go? The question is, can I become someone safe enough to meet who they're becoming? That requires something genuinely difficult. Holding your grief about the version of them you're losing while staying curious about what's emerging. Not endorsing every choice, not agreeing with every shift, but remaining present and non-threatening enough that they don't have to hide the process from you entirely. Psychologists call this identity-supportive parenting. The research is consistent. Teens whose parents stayed engaged without trying to steer the direction of identity development maintained significantly stronger attachment bonds through adolescence. Not because those parents agreed with everything, because their teens could tell that the relationship wasn't conditional on staying the same. The kid you're looking at right now, the one who seems unfamiliar, who has changed things you didn't expect or ask for, they're still yours. They're just in the middle of something enormous and largely invisible and completely necessary. And the version of them that comes out the other side will have your relationship written into it one way or another, either as a place they ran toward when they needed to figure out who they were, or as a place they ran from to protect the process from interference. Which version it becomes is still being decided, and you are still in that story. That's the part worth holding on to. If this resonated with you, subscribe. I make videos like this every week so you can better understand your teenager. And go watch this next video where I tell you what it means when your teen stops rebelling.